Thanks for tuning in to Lead Better with Nicole Harlow. Today's going to be a special episode. I'm just restarting the podcast and it is December 23rd. So I'm just sliding into that holiday, that like in between where you're doing some work, but you're like getting some holiday stuff done. And then you're hoping that there's some relaxation on the other side. And I felt really compelled to not wait until January to kickstart this podcast, but just get started today. But because I'm kind of that in between spot and it is the end of the year, I thought instead of actionable systems and marketing and branding and all the stuff that you have come to know me for and know the show for, I thought I'm going to do something different because almost everybody that I work with is in the health and wellness space. I know that I think one of my goals, there's a little fly that's flying around. One of my goals for this podcast is to actually start to layer in a little bit more like health specifically for yourself as a practitioner CEO, as an entrepreneur. I'd like to bring on more guests that can really help us walk through how to be really healthy and happy as CEO, entrepreneurs, practitioners. I think that's all part of, for me, holistically falls under the idea of lead better, really, which is why, and if you're interested in like the origins of lead better, I talked through that in a previous episode. But really, when I was thinking about what really appealed to me in lead better is one, and first and foremost, is like, how do we show up as better leaders? And that can be in our businesses, in our families, in our communities, with ourselves. I think there are so many things that we can do. And there are so many things that within the building a business and running a business that can pull us away from being a good leader, right? And so I want to just really broach that subject holistically through this podcast, through the content, and honoring and leaning into the different sectors of leadership. But lead better also has a double meaning as well, because it's about bringing great quality leads into your business. Leads as people have basically raised their hand and said, at least provisionally, I'm interested in what you have to do. Maybe they signed up for a lead magnet, maybe they signed up for a webinar, something like that. The platform and the packages and the business that we put together for this year in Lead Better is also about not only leadership, but actually better leads. And so I'm not going to go over that part today at all. This is for me is a fun episode because this is a little bit more like peeling back the curtain of like my day to day, what life is like for me as a CEO, entrepreneur of 3 agencies now: Brand Better, Podcast Better, and Lead Better. So we've got 3 different agencies working and all of our clients. And I wanted to talk through what's on my list around the things that keep me healthy, the things that help me to be a better leader, and the things that I rely on to buffer and bolster my physical, mental, spiritual space. Because that's not something I talk about very often, is just what actually are my healthy habits? What things do I feel like move the needle the most? What am I doubling down on in 2026? And for me, like when I'm at work, I am in the systems and automation and marketing and branding. And that's my 9 to 5, so to speak. But when I get off of work, I'm not spending a ton of time. That's not besides like, I'm always learning. I feel like I'm always learning in my role. And so I am somebody who's very much into like education. We'll have a webinar in the background or a podcast and like reading a book specifically for work. But when I'm in my like pleasure, play, relaxation, I'm often what I spend most of my time like reading about, learning about is health and wellness. This year 2025 was my year of like circadian biology. I got so deep down this rabbit hole and have found some of these like practices that I've learned through just copious, probably over 1,000 hours of listening to podcasts and reading books and joining courses, really diving down into more of the biological mitochondria. I'm not an expert. So really, I'm a hobbyist and just using my body as an experiment. And so I would say take everything that I say today in terms of my own habits with a grain of salt. I'm not a practitioner. This isn't health advice. This is really just me experimenting with my own body, mind, spirit, especially as it relates to showing up in a really powerful way. And I will say before I go into the healthy habits that I adapted over this year, that in full transparency, this year was the most difficult year that I have ever gone through as a CEO. And I have been running my own businesses and I've been my own boss for over 20 years now. I started my very first company when I was pretty much just out of grad school. And I felt like I was pretty unemployable. So I've had a lot of jobs, but I haven't had a lot of like career jobs because I was always like, I knew I wanted to do my own thing. And so I would always pick like slinging pizzas over like working in an office job. I had one real career job like outside of college, and I learned pretty quickly that I didn't want to advance there, and that was by all like intents and purposes it was a great job. But I knew that I wanted to travel and I wanted to have my freedoms, what that looks like, financial freedom and travel freedom and the ability to work from anywhere. And so when I was in my kind of mid 20s, I decided just that was I was going to pursue that life, and it took many business failures and lots of different ups and downs, and before I got started on Brand Better, which is about 10 years old at this point. It's crazy. And I just tell you this just to say that this year in the creation of Lead Better, which in some ways feels like just the coolest thing that I've ever built in my life, but it was also so much harder than I expected. And I actually was listening to a YouTube video the other day, and this guy was talking about like interviewing famous people who are like very successful, right? And it said by and large, what most of them will say is that like the path to success was way longer and way harder than they could have ever expected. And this shouldn't have been a surprise to me because if, in some ways I've already done this, but this year was different. There were so many new things. I felt every single day of this year, I was learning something new that stretched my brain in the development side of things, in the coding side of things, and the automation side of things. So I had really moved off of a lot of the branding side of things, which is colors and fonts and icons and creative, using the more analytical part of my brain, which was very satisfying, but was also like deeply exhausting. The decision fatigue of making such a complex new product and having to be in the weeds for pretty much it was like a full-term pregnancy. I think we're up on 10 months at this point. I feel like I'm past the labor point now. Baby's starting to like sleep through the night and I can take a little bit of time off, but this was for sure the most stressful period. And at the end of the summer, it really hit like a crescendo where I had a couple difficult client things that were coming in at the same time that I was trying to get the really built the plane as I was flying with Lead Better. And so we were lucky enough to get some early adopter clients in while I was still trying to figure out how everything was getting put together. And so that caused a lot of stress where I had a real physical reaction. I think I just like hives all over my body. And my nervous system was just like, girl, I am out. And so I really needed some mental, emotional, spiritual triage at a part where it was just so difficult. And I say this just to say, one, just to be transparent around like what the year actually looked like. And I think a big theme that I want to teach for 2026, especially as it relates to Lead Better, is this idea around like passion and doing things that you love. And I think we're sold a bit of a false promise around like that our big work that we want to do in the world is like things that we love. But it's like, even if we love it and we feel really passionate and we have a mission, like there is still parts of it that are going to be really hard. So it's on some level, the question is like, what are you willing to suffer a bit for? And maybe, I don't know if suffering's the right word, but just like, what are you willing to dig in and have grit for? And I think that I want to like lean more into that messaging, like for us as leaders, for us to be able to lead better, like we need to choose our battles. And this is, I know that there's like a lot of complexity here because I also want to teach like how to bake in and build systems around ease. So I think this concept of another thing, that's going to come up more as a theme in 2026 is this idea around like necessary hard versus unnecessary hard. So like necessary hard is it's what we've signed up for like personal growth, right? I would see this year in building lead better, like I look back and it's all good. I think there's ways that I see now I could have supported myself more. I think this year taught me about boundaries, especially around emotional boundaries, because I am deeply a people pleaser, as any good Libra rising should be. And my moon is in my career house. And so my emotions lie really deeply in my career house. And I've really had to learn, and I'm still in the process of learning, like how to develop really good boundaries around like my feeling space and other people being happy, neutral, unhappy, and not looking at my to-do list and saying, okay, for me, I'll look at my to-do list and the one that has the greatest emotional charge is the thing that I feel like I have to do that. That's not always the case. And generally that is not the best course of action for me to start my day. Or a lot of times they're not even things that need to be done that day. They just start giving me like, it's like an open emotional loop. And so more on this to come too, because I want to like muse around like boundaries, leadership, emotions. And then I'm always curious how like things like astrology and human design, Myers-Briggs, things like that, personality, these little personality recipes that they have influence all of that. But yeah, all that to say, I'd love to just talk you through some of the things that really helped me get through one of the more difficult years in my life, very certainly the hardest year, the hardest I've ever worked in a singular year. We started off 2024 into 2025 doing 4 conferences. I say we, my husband and I, we did 4 conferences in 4 months. That was like traveling out to Vegas twice, New York City, down to Miami. Miami was definitely the best. I do not like Las Vegas, and I'm not crazy about New York City either. I am like not a big city and kind of like plinky lights and casinos and all that kind of stuff. And so that was taxing to be like traveling, talking to a lot of people, setting up the booth, only to kind of get to the end of those 4 conferences and realize, I don't know that like the way that we have things set up in business is really working on the brand better side because we sell high ticket, but people leave after we're finished with them and we didn't have any kind of like recurring model. And so we're always like feast or famine and fishing for new people rather than retaining the people that we actually like and that we're doing a good job for. So that was really like the impetus. Again, if you want to hear more of the origin story, you can go back to the previous episode where I kind of go through like how that really turned into the decision to go and create Lead Better. But anyway, you get the message. Difficult year, needed a lot of backup in terms of my body really reaching out and saying, please, we can't spend 14 hours a day hunched over the computer. There was just so much screen time, so much like bad posture and figuring out how can I make this and also be caring and supportive of the rest of me, right? Which was screaming out for some TLC. Hey, remember you have a body. Remember you have a spirit. It's not all just like mind and screen. But that was the nature of the beast of putting all of this together. I'm going to break these down into categories. Like I said, a lot of this comes from circadian biology. Some of this other stuff is like things that I've collected over the years. And I would say in terms of, this may seem like a lot of things and may seem really expensive. A lot of these things I bought over the years, most of them on payment plans. Like my sauna, that's on here, is one of the first of these things that I invested in. And I got this in the year right after COVID. I was like, we're going to get a sauna because if we're going to be stuck in the house, let's have some. We used to go to the YMCA to use the sauna. But that was like, I think we paid that off in $80 a month. And so like you may hear this list and say, "Oh my God, it's nice for you. You got all this money for all these devices." Like, and most of our things we paid off in a payment plan over the years. And then we might just be like, okay, is there something that we're going to invest in right now? Put it on like a payment plan, and then that's $30 a month. We bought a whole weight set a few years ago and paid it off at $35 a month as part of our like Smith machine and some weights in our little like home gym, Peloton. So most of these things do not get paid, bought outright. And actually, a lot of them are free or pretty low cost. So I'm going to start with the number one for me. And maybe it's like a shocker for you, unless you're like also obsessed with circadian biology like I am, but sunlight exposure. I had a call with somebody and it was actually a sales call and she didn't turn out to be a client, but it was really wild because she was like getting this like message downloads and like I said, take all this with a grain of salt. She's getting these like downloads and she stopped me and she's, I have to tell you something. Is it okay if I tell you something? Like something's coming through. I was like, yeah, so you need to get out and watch the sunrise every morning. I'll be like, okay. I'm not a morning person at all. And this is not one, the sunrise part of it. I have not, I've failed on many a sunrise to actually get up because I like I'm more of a night owl. And we've got teenage kids in the house, my stepkids. And so when they're here with us, it's they come alive at night. And I don't want to be in bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, even though I know that that's probably a great time for my body and my biology to be in bed. But it's the time that we want to be up hanging with the kids and talking and relating and watching a show. And maybe we're eating dinner later on. So like none of this do I do perfectly. There are more general guidelines. So I would say like light in general. In fact, my word for 2026 is light. Light in all ways. Light in the biological light of the sun, light in the type of light that I have around me, which I'm going to go into, how I light my desk and how I light my house, lightness of spirit, lightness of ease, lightness of work, lightness and playfulness, lightness in my personality. Light is just there's so many components to it from like the biological up to the spirit side of it. So much so that it's like almost too deep for me to go into besides the fact that like light is just like my word for the year. And my North Star is to get as much light as possible and to be as light as possible and to allow the systems. This is where it gets into the businessy side of it. Allow the systems to support me so my business feels really light as well. Sales feel light, finances feel light. Everything has a lightness to it. So I started off this probably in what was the time when my body was suffering the most, which was like towards the end of the summer, like August. And I started listening to podcasts and just laying out in the sun, just getting as much sunlight as possible. I would just spend hours in the shade and then into the sun, going out on walks and just spending, once I was like done the work that I needed to be inside, I was outside as much as I could be. And something that I've carried with me into the wintertime, which is brand new for me, because every year I get, if not seasonal depression, like a feeling of just trappedness, a kind of mental claustrophobia that makes me feel like, oh my God, I need to get out to somewhere where it's warm and sunny and I need to put a bathing suit on and I need to be outside. And that feels like all very natural reactions to have to be suddenly being like indoors all the time, working, not getting outside. So about 6 weeks ago, I was like, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to figure out a way to get more light exposure. And that's not like buying a sad lamp or something like that. I was like, I want it to be like real, natural sunlight. Because even though at my latitude, for the next 30 days or so, I've got a cool app. What is it called? It's called My Circadian. Shout out to Sarah Kleiner, I think her name is. So the My Circadian app, it tells you, I would like track over the summer, like my vitamin D, how much vitamin D my body was making. I would track like the hours to be out where you'd get more like UVA or UVB or more red light, the sunrise and sunset, the vitamin D window. So that was really cool. I used that just quantifying some of the things. And the UVB, so the vitamin D, your capacity to make vitamin D goes away at my latitude for 6 weeks or so. We're 30 days out from that right now. But I wanted to still make sure that I was getting out and getting like adequate sunlight. But see, my problem around like habit stacking sometimes is like I have a bit of like inherent laziness. I think all good Turians do, earth signs in general, but especially the Turians. So I have some inherent laziness. Like when I'm done work, a lot of times I want to lay down. What was really great about the sunlight exposure in the summer is I just laid down. I'd make like a nest for myself out on the deck and I would just lay and I would sleep sometimes. Like I try to emulate like the lions, right? Just getting outside and my cats just like flopping in the sun. Like they know what's up. I want to do more of that. So I wanted to like, I always felt like in the winter, I'd have to like habit stack being outside with exercising. And that sometimes is like not really what I want to do. And so I finally found a way through all of this. What I did is we moved into a new house. And so I like redid my garage. So the garage is a sun trap because when you open up the garage door, the sunlight just like filters in as it goes past, like pretty much all day. So as long as like the sun's up, like from when it rises to when it sets, it's filtering in some part of the garage. So I took the front part of the garage, like where the door would open up, and much like where people like make their garage like a home gym, I actually made it like my little light spot. So I have a couch that I set up. It was like an old couch from a thrift store at some point. It was literally just sitting there. I put a rug down, I put the couch, I put some nice pillows, I got some blankets. And now every morning I'm in Pennsylvania, and so like the winter is cold. It's like snowy or yucky, but the sunlight or the light itself like is always there, even when it's cloudy. Like today it was like snowy. There was like snow from last night and it was cloudy, but there's still like biophotons available, right? And so what I do is I don't necessarily get up with the sunrise every day. That's a habit that I think like I will gently move myself towards because I think there's a lot of value in the actual like the infrared that's available when the sun is rising. But I try to get up like as early as I can or as early as I want to because sometimes I want to sleep in. I wake up, I put on a layer of merino wool, then I put some like nice comfy sweatpants on, a little like I've got like an alpaca sweatshirt kind of thing with a hood, like gloves, hat, my like I have an REI puffy thing. And I've got these little like puffy slipper kind of things that keep my feet warm. I get my structured water with hydrogen, which is another thing that was it's been really helpful this year is like I have a little like pitcher that structures the water. I use these hydrogen tabs, H2 tabs from Dr. McCullough. I actually got a testing kit. This is how geeky I am. We had the pitcher was supposed to be a hydrogen pitcher, which was not cheap. And I got a kit on Amazon and I tested out how much like parts per billion, I think it is, that was coming off of our filter. And it was like hardly any at all. Then I got these like Dr. Mercola tabs, which just dissolve in the water. And then they were exactly what they said they were going to be. And we're in like a therapeutic dose. So I just do those now. So I have the little like water spinner and then put the hydrogen tab in there, bring the water outside. It's just in just a glass of water. Let that get a little light on it. Drink that up. I have a cup of mate tea with a little bit of milk in it. I sit there and I get as much light on my body. My body's pretty much covered up, so it's really just on my face. I don't put my contacts in. I take my glasses off. I just let that light get right into my eyeballs, do its thing. While I'm out there, I just really enjoy it. I'm like all bundled up, but I'm in the sun and it's really increased I feel like my general happiness levels, my general mood. I am able to bring my like clipboard out there and write my to-do list for the day. Sometimes I do some like tapping, especially like financial ease tapping. There's a guy on YouTube that I really like. His name's Brad Yates. He does these little like tapping routines that I just love. They're like super simple, but helps like orient me. A new thing I've been doing outside that I really enjoy too is just voice chatting with ChatGPT. So like stream of consciousness, like around marketing ideas or content ideas. And that's really helped me just a little more stream of consciousness come up and work collaboratively and come up with some ideas. So that's been pretty cool too. So that's what my like winter light looks like outside. Then in the house, I've moved things around a little bit. Like I come in after my like outdoor light exposure. I have a red light therapy. It's actually one of those like face ones, Omnilux, I think it's called. I've had it for a couple years until I realized, oh wait, I listened to a podcast, Huberman Lab podcast recently about red light therapy. And the one thing I didn't know about red light therapy is it doesn't really matter where you put it. Like the red light will move to different parts of your body. So I thought that was super cool. And suddenly I realized, oh, this face mask that was quite expensive that I don't use very often on my face, like I could use it on different parts of my body. So I started putting it on my abdomen, which is a really great spot to use red light therapy. And I just like wrap that around me when I'm making my breakfast. So I'm getting some red light therapy, which is better to have in the morning. Again, I'm not a practitioner. I'm just sharing some stuff that I learned that I've researched a lot. So I try to do that in the morning as best as I can. And I make myself a breakfast, which it seems really simple actually, but I would put that up there with one of my top things, one of my top habits that I started doing is I start off the day with the sun and the water and the hydrogen, a cup of tea. I come in with a red light. I slowly make myself some breakfast. I'm giving myself enough time to actually sit and enjoy my breakfast, not while working. My breakfast is, I try to eat, this is like a weird way of saying this, but like I always think about the way that I eat as like a guy from like the 1940s, 1950s, like going off to do like manual labor for the day, right? What would I picture like his wife making him for breakfast? And it would be like a bunch of eggs and depending on how much like money that they had, I could pick like a glass of milk, some like beef or like bacon or some organ meats, maybe some potatoes. I'd try, especially it's the winter here, so I tried to go like more animal based. So the things that are on my like regular rotation is like that I have almost every day. So it's like egg yolks, raw local milk, which we can get here luckily in Pennsylvania, grass-fed beef, local if possible, grass-fed butter. We get homemade sourdough bread made from the people in our network. And then we're able to get like some beautiful pasture raised eggs, organ meats. In Pennsylvania, we have a thing called scrapple, which is like scraps of pig heart and liver. And apologies if you're a vegetarian or vegan. I try to have some whitefish caviar, which seems really fancy, but it's actually not that expensive from Whole Foods and is just really good and really yummy. I try to prioritize like animal based foods, things that are local, and really just things that feel like old timey and nourishing, like grass fed beef that's been like cooked in like a deep broth, like things that are like warm, nourishing, nicely fatty. And I think the thinking around the breakfast that I have is I want to tell my nervous system and really tell my body, like, you're safe, you're fed, you're okay for the day. So then I can start like relying on my brain to use it because I've had to use my brains and still am using my brain like just really hardcore, right? I'm like, my brain is tired by the end of the day. So the old me would be like drinking a couple cups of tea, not eating anything until 3 or 4 o'clock, intermittent fasting, right? Just tanking my nervous system. So now I try to start off every day with like signals of safety and satiety to my brain, my body. You got enough fuel. I've got you. You're good. You're not starving. Like, we're good. We have enough energy for the day because we've just fed on light, basically. And then we fed on some red light. And then we fed on some like really yummy, hearty food. So that's how I eat like that. I'm not doing a ton of exercise right now because, to be honest, I feel like my body is still, I'm still in high production mode. So I know that this will swap out and there'll be a time of the business, a time as a CEO where I'm not like, it's not so challenging on a day to day. And I think that's probably where my nervous system will be, it'll be supportive to bring in some more kit training, or I stopped going to hot yoga classes. I'm like gentle AF with myself in terms of what am I doing outside of when I'm working, using my brain, nervous system. That's where I'm going to the our infrared sauna that we have here. I got a membership for the winter at this, it's actually like a tanning salon, but they have this like red light heat cocoon kind of thing where like you lay in it for half an hour and it like vibrates you. So it's like a lymphatic like vibration. So you're kind of like clearing out the gunk. It's putting some infrared heat and some red light and it's vibrating you. And I just put on a podcast and most days I just fall asleep. So I'm like going somewhere else to allow myself to take a nap because I find it really hard to take a nap at home. So rather than going out to an exercise class, I go and I just let myself just like sleep for a little bit, get in some light. I have also, still on the idea of light, I went through and been learning a lot about LED lights and also somebody who spends a lot of time on the screen. And so a couple of things that I've done throughout the house is we replaced all of our LED bulbs. We moved into this new house. It's a rental. And miraculously, they had left behind a lot of old incandescent bulbs because the incandescent bulbs are really hard to get these days. So we had enough to replace all of the bulbs here. So we took out all the LEDs. And now we have incandescents all throughout the house, including my office. And then I supplemented in my office with some reptile bulbs that you can get from Amazon. They're not that expensive at all. A bit of a fire hazard if I make sure that they have them inside of the right kind of, what would you call it, like lamps that are specifically for like the reptile cages and things like that. So I have two full spectrum reptile bulbs, and then I have two infrared red bulbs that I have here on my desk. So I have them pointed not at my eyes, but down at my hands. And that is supposedly helpful to counteract like the blue light that's coming off of the computer, which is like a big iMac screen that I'm staring at for multiple hours a day. So I've got like my light pretty much dialed in here and then throughout the house. I also, in terms of light, I replaced the light bulbs in my bedroom with red lights. I actually did the wrong thing and I bought them from Amazon. Just don't make my mistake. Some of them are just like blue LEDs that they paint red. So you want to make sure that it actually is these are LED bulbs, but they're in the spectrum of, I think, 650 or 670 or something like that. So you want to make sure that you're not getting the ones that are just painted red, but you're actually still like getting that spike of blue. And a cool, interesting, maybe not cool, but an interesting rabbit hole if you want to go down the LED conversation. But that's not for me. That's not a story for me to tell. That's your own rabbit hole to go down. But it was enough information for myself and my family to go through and say, okay, we're getting as many of these LEDs out of here. Even the lights for my Christmas tree, I ordered incandescent Christmas lights because the LEDs, they flicker like crazy. And the actual like holiday, like Christmas LED lights are some of the worst. At least that's what I had learned. We went incandescent for the Christmas lights as well. So light, like I said, was a big thing for this year. Another thing is, this is just a little thing, but I got myself a new chair for my office. And I got a new desk and a chair, not very expensive, from Amazon. I want to say like the chair was like $40 and the desk was like under 100. The desk is like a sitting desk. And so when I'm ready, I can stand up. That's actually been really nice. I've got a little like walking pad, treadmill kind of thing. I don't use that as much as I probably should, but I like the sitting aspect so I can move positions throughout the day when I'm working, and just like standing allows me to just stretch a little bit, and that's really cool. I also got my like a wide chair that you can sit cross-legged on. And I find that's really nice too. So when I'm like sitting, I can be cross-legged, and then I find that's just comforting. I like to sit cross-legged a lot, so it's allowed me to be more comfortable when I'm working. So one other thing that I think, I'm not doing a lot of supplements right now, but in terms of some other stuff that's really, I think, helped push the needle. One of my like day-to-day things, two things that I take pretty much every day that I think really help. One is humic minerals. I don't eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I think the humic minerals I notice my digestion is a lot better when I'm taking that every day. So I take humic minerals. I take magnesium. or spray magnesium, sometimes like on my abdomen before I go to bed. So those are two of my like standards. I also, in the summer when things were at the peak of stress, I did some hormone testing. I did go on BHRT for a little bit for a triage, and that was awesome. I think my estrogen was really low, and having that kind of bolstered really, I noticed a difference in my ability to deal with stress and just my general, like my battery felt like it wasn't as flat. I signed up with a company called Mira where they do these testing pee sticks. And I am actually not using them right now, but for months, I would test my hormones every day. And I actually found that really helpful. So I'm not like advocating for hormone replacement therapy or anything, but what was really helpful was just to see my hormonal fluctuations throughout the month and see what really day to day and start to attribute like, oh, this is how I feel when my estrogen's low. This is how I feel. So that I found like that was really helpful to have a little bit more data around what was actually like, I don't know, tracking my mood with tracking my hormones. So that was really helpful to have that in the space, to have the BHRT, and then also to have the mirror testing sticks too. And that's a journey that's unfolding. I'm not sure where that will go next, but that's not necessarily, I don't need to talk about that on this podcast other than to say that I think in terms of a triage, I feel like the extra estrogen at a time when I really needed it was very therapeutic and much needed at the time when I got started. And I felt almost like instantaneous relief from some symptoms that I was experiencing. I'll say that already as a lifestyle, I don't drink alcohol very much. I maybe once a month, I might have a night where I'll have a few drinks, but that's pretty much, yeah, like maybe a once a month kind of thing. And sometimes there's months where I don't do it at all. It wasn't really a matter of cutting out alcohol because that was not really in the picture already too much. Some other things I think that have really helped too is we already had a PEMF mat. And so I think that brand is called Healthy Line, something that we had invested in on a payment plan a few years ago. So it's really nice to have this like beautiful kind of crystal mat to lay out on. I think the jury's out around like the EMFs and the PEMF mat. And so I think I've been using that a little bit less than I have in previous years. But it still is there just as a nice, if muscles are sore, there was a little bit of time in like end of the summer where I wasn't sleeping very well. So I was actually sleeping on putting it on like a sleep setting. And that was really helpful. And putting the warmth. So it has like the infrared heat, laying on that, grounding out, putting on like the Schumann resonance, grounding. And like I said, it's not something I'm using a lot right now, but in the time when I needed the most support, that was actually really helpful to just lay on there. Get a lot of baths. I think the bath with some magnesium salt and some boron, some essential, not boron, borax for boron. I started getting these like really nice swanky packs. I think that the brand is called Fluid or Floyd. I feel it's like FLEWD. I'll see if I can find the link to it. They have a sad one, so something sad. I'll find the link and I'll put it in there. It has a little bit of lithium in there, and so I was like throwing those in the bath. It smells really good. Those were during the most stressful points. I was using those. I don't have the bags of it right now, but I would definitely buy them again. That made the bath like so nice. And thinking about like a therapeutic bath of just what can you put in the bath, like the Epsom salts, like some borax. I just buy that. The normal, what is it, 12 horses or something like that, 12 wagons. I should have been prepared with these names as I was recording this, but, and then the fluid stuff with the SAD, specifically the SAD, the lithium, putting them in there. That was awesome. And getting ready for bed and going to sleep. So ending my nights with some like binaural beats on, light some candles, have a little Palo Santo, make it a bit of a ritual. I try to get in the bath at least a couple times a week, just still to just like unwind. Kundalini yoga has always been like a mainstay in terms of the spirited side, really helping me to connect to the bigger picture of things, my bigger self as a leader, as a person, whatever that is that your spiritual practice is. It's something that the mantra and the music and the Kriyas really helped me to connect to my own sense of power and my own sense of ease and lightness and beauty and all of the yummy, juicy things that you'd want your practice to connect you to. I try to keep that in the rotation. And then a couple just little things. about a year, maybe a little bit more, I switched from Bluetooth to like completely wired headphones. Even these are wired. I don't use AirPods anymore. I haven't for a while. I use the wired headphones. I have a Kindle that's like the e-ink Kindle. And so sometimes in the evenings when I want to like research things, I let myself do it in a slow way. And so I'll put my phone away and I'll use like the web browser that's on the Kindle, which is like slow AF. So it's going to remind you of 2012 or something or before. And it's the e-ink. And so it's a little bit better for my eyes, but it still gives me the opportunity to look things up when I want to because you're watching a show and you want to who is that actor? What do I know them from? Or I want to ask about that or this. So you can just get on like a Google browser but it's got to be the Kindle that has the e-ink. Eventually, when I have a little bit of one of my next purchases, I want to get there's Daylight Computer is the brand and they do a completely e-ink like e-pad tablet kind of thing. So that looks really cool. And then there's a phone that I want to get. I'm actually wanting to phase out like the iPhone for 2026 for myself and then use one of these. And it's like an e-ink screen phone. I can't remember the company, but I'll see if I can find that for the show notes too. Yeah, I'm sure I could talk way more about all of these things individually just because this is something that's captivated a lot of my like interests and enthusiasm for this year and are all things everything on this list I feel like has made a positive impression. A lot of these things are really simple and easy to do. I would say if you want to do one of these things and you are like an entrepreneur, CEO, practitioner, I would say dialing in your light, and that means like outdoor light exposure time as often as you can. I'm trying to like the ideal, I think, is sunrise, sunset, and then getting some like sun breaks, even just for a few minutes throughout the day. So, like setting your alarm where you can just get outside, even better if you can take your shoes off and ground out for a couple minutes. That would be great. And then thinking about what can you do with the light inside of your office, the light that you're sitting under, the lights in your house. Like there are so many cool resources. Dr. Alexis Jasmine, I think her name is actually Dr. Alexis Cowan, but on Instagram, she goes by, I believe, Dr. Alexis Jasmine, a Jazymn, something like that. If you Google it, you'll find it. She's been really instrumental in like me learning a lot of this stuff, especially around the lights and how to like think about your lighting indoors and on your in your office and when you're like in the evening and blue blocker glasses and all this kind of cool stuff. There's a lot out there and a lot of it is free or low cost. Being on screens and sitting in front of a computer every day is just a reality of where I'm at right now and where the business is at, and you might be the same. So what can we do and what have I done to make sure that like I'm counterbalancing the ill effects from just being hours a day staring at a screen, sitting, poor posture, dehydration of my cells and my mitochondria, just basically like powering down, like, which was also, I'd highly recommend the Huberman Lab podcast about red light therapy because some of this stuff can feel on the little bit of the woo side, but the guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy who was on there was just like super grounded and one of the top researchers in this field. And that was a pretty recent episode. So there's a lot of like cool stuff that's coming out right now. But he was saying like when they watch mitochondria under blue light in a lab, they basically stop. They like just stop powering up. They're like, they just, not that they die, but just like, I'm like, where's my power? I'm sitting here and I'm like, literally allowing my battery to drain. And so I think a lot of this is like what started off as triage has moved into just like how to empower myself, how to bring it all full circle is like how to use these healthy habits to become in this lifestyle, really, to become a better leader. And part of being a good leader is making sure that my body is in the healthiest shape that it can be in this phase and knowing that is phasic, right? So I know that there will be a time in 2026 where the capacity of the business grows. It's less reliant on me. And so I might find myself with a day of, oh, it's Tuesday and I don't have anything on my schedule. Maybe I would go get a massage. I started going to the chiropractor. That was one thing that I am investing in that's actually it's not very expensive. I think it's like $50 a visit, but it actually makes a big difference just in helping my spine and my neck and things that get out from just sitting in front of the computer, getting those kind of back in balance again. But there are things like I think when I feel like my nervous system is more robust, I will bring more exercise back in again and just like up in intensity. But this isn't the time for me to be like, I don't know, doing like a 40-minute hit session or something like that. I'm just like, maybe I'll throw 5 minutes in here and there. We've got the Peloton. It feels good to sweat, but I would rather be sweating from like the sauna at this point, or even sweating from like sitting in a really hot bath than overtaxing my nervous system, undoing the good that I'm trying to do. Like I said, take all of this with a grain of salt. Do your own research. None of this is health advice. I am not a practitioner. I am a hobbyist. These have all been things that I'm very intuitive and in touch with my body. These are all things that felt like they were really positive influences in life and continue to be positive influences. So if I can share any resources at all, you feel free to DM me on Instagram at brandbetterco. I love geeking out about this. So if there's anything in here that piques some interest around why did you do it that way, or how did you learn about this, hop over to Instagram because I'd love to share some of the podcasts and books and resources. And also hop over there and let me know what are some healthy habits that you feel like really push the needle forward for you, or things that I should know about right after listening to this episode. And I'd love to, if you're interested in learning more about Lead Better, about working with us, you can go over to leadbetterhq.com. This is where you'll learn more about the business itself, what we do, what the tiers are of our membership. We've got some amazing clients right now. We're getting some amazing transformations in their business. And I'd love to talk more about what it is that we do. And in future episodes, what you can expect is more leadership content, more content around building amazing systems that really support you to be the best leader that you can be, and a little splattering of some health focused content. So if there's anything in here that piques your interest and you'd like to have a guest come on, or you'd like to hear more about this, let me know and then I'll hook it up. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. This was a really fun episode to record. I like peeling back the curtain on my habits, and like this is what I spend a lot of time researching and being curious about. And it's a pleasure to be able to share this with you. I will see you on the next episode, which is going to be coming up pretty soon. Bye.